should we get started? Right? Let's get started. Hey everybody. How you doing? Good morning. And welcome to the first ever GDC eSport Summit. Yeah, get hyped. Yeah, right? This is amazing. Look at this room. We packed a big room. This is awesome. We didn't know if anyone was going to show up. It was just last year that I remember the notion of when will GDC start doing stuff on esports was kicking around, right? It's kicking around on Twitter. Mm-hmm. My son, James Lantz, everything I know about esports I know from my son, James Lantz, who's currently talking, by the way. If you want to go see a real great talk, it's about Invisible Ink. It's happening right now. But my son was asking on Twitter, when will there be what's the over-under on GDC having an esports summit? And we thought, oh, 2, 3, 5 years. But now here we are, a year later, and it's clear that this is an important topic, that this is kind of a watershed moment for our industry, for game design, I think, and us as a field, in terms of the kind of games we make, in terms of the business around our games, in terms of our impact on the world. I think that it's very exciting that as games continue to evolve and grow and become more important and more ubiquitous and more accessible and more widespread, they're also becoming more different, right? So that, we have the Stanley Parable and we have League of Legends, right? We have games that are rich, complicated storytelling environments, and we have games that are deep competitive systems. And there's just no sign of a convergence. Instead, there's this continued evolution of new kinds of games and new kinds of culture. And esports is especially interesting, I think, and especially important to those of us who really love these kinds of complex, lifelong game experiences. The kind of games that are traditional sports and board games and card games, the fact that we as an industry are starting to make culture that could have an impact on the world that is like the impact that basketball has on the world, or the impact that baseball has on the world, or soccer, association football, right? The kinds of like global world-changing culture that has transformed history, that people architect cities around, and that people live in games that people live inside of, people make lives inside of, make careers inside of. The fact that we are sort of rising to that challenge, I think, is amazing for us as an industry. So welcome. We're very excited on behalf of myself, Frank Lantz, and my co-advisees on the board, Patrick Miller, Lil Chen, Rod Breslau, under the guidance of Victoria Peterson. We thank you for joining us for this first ever GDC eSports Summit. And yes, so thanks everybody. And I'm especially excited to kick it off with a conversation with this gentleman sitting right next to me. This is Ryan Scott, yes, and also known as Morello. And Ryan Scott is lead designer of Riot's game, League of Legends, which is an incredibly influential and important game. And so we are going to just have a kind of informal discussion about the design philosophy of League of Legends and what it means to be in charge of maybe the world's most important esport. I think it's not even a debate. I think it really is. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. So there'll be plenty of time for yourselves to ask Ryan questions as well. So to kick it off, I was just saying to Ryan how much I love this game. I really do. I love League of Legends.
He was.
I really, and I think it's a beautiful game. It's something that part of what's beautiful about it is how hard it is to explain to people, right?
Because it's pretty tough, right?
Yeah.
So I actually sorry, I'm just going to totally just run all over this question apparently.
Yeah.
I was at having a couple of drinks with dinner last night, and I ran into this random business guy who works in finance.
Yeah.
And he asked about it, and I had to explain it. And I'd never tried to explain it to somebody who had no idea, like talking to your grandma about it, you know what I mean? And it was hard, man.
Yeah.
Like, it was like, you know, you get 5 guys together against 5 guys, except they're not guys, they're dragons and monsters, and they have guns. And I just got in the weeds super quickly because like you didn't have the framework.
Let me tell you how I try to do it when I'm explaining to people. I say it's chess plus basketball plus Pokemon. Okay?
It's pretty good.
So
I like that.
It's chess in the sense that at its heart, League of Legends is a strategy game, right? And you can see its roots. I mean, it's a game of position and tactics and decision making, and you can see its roots that go through, of course, real-time strategy games, which are more obviously kind of a hyper, quantum version of a, like a board game, like a real-time board game. But you can see those roots. Those roots go into RPG combat, right? RPG combat going back to Dungeons and Dragons, which itself is heavily rooted in tabletop wargaming, right? Which is, you can see Kriegspiel, which is this weird chess variant, that they used to play in the Austrian army. And it's those dynamics are still part of the game. So there's definitely chess. Basketball, because it is a game with an incredibly high skill ceiling, and it's a team-based game, so it's about execution, right? It's about execution on a team in real time, calling plays, executing plays, those kinds of dynamics, the back and forth. It's very much like basketball. And then it's like Pokemon in the sense that it is intentionally Baroque, right? There are all of these elaborate things that are just, you need to memorize, right? In order to play this game, you have to know reams and reams of information about champions and items and what they're called and what they do and what their meaning is. And in that sense, it has that kind of large-scale kind of memorization problem attached to it.
Right.
Is that a good, do you like that description?
I do, and I think the Pokemon thing is interesting because it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you have both, hey, as you learn more about this game, you kind of feel like you're gaining mastery over that knowledge, and that's an understanding you're gaining. But at the same time, that knowledge can be a burden if mismanaged, or if it's too much at once, or the wrong time to expect players to have that knowledge. So that's always, and I think Pokemon's probably an easier example because there's a lot of the game is that memorization, where in League of Legends, one of the pieces of that. So where it's being beneficial and not is, I think, pretty interesting.
Yeah. So League of Legends, I think, without a doubt, the biggest, most influential, important contemporary esport. What is it like to be in charge of the design of this thing? I mean, does that weigh heavy on your head at night, or is it light and easy? What's it like?
There's a combination. I would say the best way to probably describe the way it feels is you get nerve-sighted. Right, you're kind of scared because it is a pretty daunting task because when you're at the kind of size we are now and you have as many players as we do, when you make a mistake, a lot of people suffer, right? And game design.
For example, give me an example.
For example,
what's a mistake you guys make?
Let's see. There's a lot, so picking one is interesting.
Here we go.
I would say. Designing champions like Yorick that were great ideas, that were awesome starts that we didn't do our due diligence into making the right kind of minion mancer character, for example. Yeah. So imagine all the people who get excited about a guy like Yorick, or wow, I really wanted this Gravedigger guy, I wanted this Necromancer style fantasy, and then you're like, oops. That's a really big letdown for a lot of players, both for people who wanted to play it and people who were like, wow, what's this going to add to the game? What's this going to make for new strategies available? And when we mess up, I think it's very noticeable. I think it's painful for a lot of people. The exciting part is kind of the opposite of that. Is you have a lot of ability to kind of make things that are meaningful for players and actually change their experience for the better, which is kind of what gets you up and going in every day.
Give us an example of one of those. Now that you were nice enough to tell us what you consider a mistake, what's one thing that was really a delight when you put it out there and the way people responded?
I tend to think honestly, some of the reception we got around Draven was really incredible. Just because I felt like it was like the community really latched onto him in a way that we'd hoped they would. And so when you see that, for every time you see, oh my God about these problems, then you see, wow, I love this feature, or this champion's great. And those kind of things are what are exciting. You see those and you're like, wow, we still need to learn from those successes. We can't just rest on our laurels when we do something right. But that's what makes the job satisfying.
Nice.
Is when you see things like
that. Give us a little, just a little overview of the structure of game design at Riot.
Okay, so this will be a quick and dirty because process is kind of boring. But so basically, we play test twice a day, every day. All new champions that we're developing, balance changes, sometimes features. Like
what's an example of a new champ that you're testing?
Sorry. His name. We actually have code names for him, so I can just say whatever I want.
Yeah, give us the code. Give us the code.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, no.
Because then I realized I totally described the champion, and that was a bad mistake.
No spoilers.
So that's okay.
Okay,
that's okay.
So play test twice a day.
So play test twice a day. That's new champions, balance changes. New features, sometimes like jungle. We tested jungle on that same cadence. Items, any item changes, systems changes like SRU. We actually helped test that out, even though that wasn't as firmly in the game design camp. We work on non-game design only teams, so it's not like a team of game designers all get around and form a cabal and talk about, let's design stuff. No, it's like it's a designer, several different disciplines of art within animation, visual effects, modeling, et cetera, sound folks. Narrative writers and engineers all work together to create most of the content and features you see. Like New Jungle had all those guys, right? We had to make visual effects for the Smite to work. New champions are, of course, all these things. Balance changes tend to be a little bit more single discipline, but that's mostly because we do them so fast. We don't really remake spells in that process. So with that, we do the playtest in the morning, get feedback, use that as our iteration points for the day, do some iteration, and then test again at about 5 o'clock and test and kind of watch what was before, what was after, what effect did this change have. We try to use a very structured engineering style of thinking, of systemic thinking, right? So when we see something, we want to go, the answer of, hey, wouldn't it be cool if might be a good start for an idea. But it's cool is never good enough at Riot. We don't think that that's a valid design reasoning to do something. It's like, wow, I want to accomplish a skill. Let's say we take a look at Vi's Q, for example, right? When we were making that, we didn't just kind of trip into that because it would be cool if she punched something. It would be. But it was like, wow, we really want her to have kind of a big lead-in before she can engage with people. Then we made that's a different conversation. And we wanted to have a lot of warning. We want players to be able to predict where it would go. We'd like her to be able to change that prediction. We'd like there to be a little bit of a mind game when you see her charging up. What's going to happen next? So we actually developed mechanics to accomplish that goal. And that's a lot of what we test. It's like, oh, okay, I put this skill in the game, and okay, we're testing it. It's like, did it do that? Oh, if not, why not? Was it external factors of the play test? Was it the skill isn't functioning in this way? Players can't understand the skill, so they're not making decisions around it. It's just completely too weak, and players or play testers are deciding to not use it. All sorts of things like that. So it's kind of an A/B test between our play tests, and we continuously iterate. We're doing 10 play tests a week and we continually do that, which slowly gets us to the finish line on the game design side.
So you guys have specific kind of problems you're looking to solve.
Yeah,
absolutely. You identify things that you're working on, your problems. What about a bigger picture roadmap? How far out do you guys architect at a high level the kind of long-term evolution of where you think you're going?
So I'm gonna be real with you, real quick. We just started doing that much better recently. It's not been something we've been kind of. The game has grown, as you guys who have experienced server downtime know, a little faster than we can keep up with it sometimes. Game design is some of the same way, like the speed in which we work, how far we want to go, and how fast we want to do it. So we were working very reactively for a long time, and just this year, I think we've started looking further ahead, 6 to 12 months ahead, and going, here's the world we want to get it to. This preseason was the kind of a first drop of that kind of thinking, and there's more work to do on the jungle. But I think that planning is going to make it so that we can have a little bit more of that same kind of problem solving. Instead of just looking at the ability, let's look at the champion roster. Instead of just looking at the champion, let's look at the systems around the items, right? Let's look at those things and have real objectives for them that are months out so we can start working on those. So, so the short answer is not very well in the past, better now, hopefully even better in the future.
So one of the reasons that I love League of Legends is that at a time when it sometimes can seem like the only kind of pop culture and entertainment people want is lowest common denominator, easily digestible, disposable, and instead, here we have this thing. This is like maybe the most popular video game right now, at all. And it is this incredibly deep and complex and difficult game, right? It's really hard. It's bone-crushingly hard.
Yeah.
It's almost impossible to play. This is the way I describe it. It's like the most popular game in the world is kind of unplayable, right? If you sit down to play League of Legends, it's like, where would you begin, you know? There's almost no way in. And it's like, to me, that's beautiful, right? That's great because that shows us that there is an appetite for challenging culture, right? In that people don't just want to be entertained or distracted or to escape, that they will seek out experiences that are deeply challenging, in which there's really only one kind of relationship you can have with League, which is this relationship of self-improvement, right? Like, I'm in this thing to understand where my weaknesses are, to feel the hurt, of my own limitations, and then I'm on this road and I'm climbing up this hill, and that is beautiful. That to me, it makes me optimistic as a game designer. Yeah. But at the same time, as a designer, I'm always looking for ways to bring people into my games. I'm always looking for, I'm always thinking about accessibility. I'm always thinking about teaching. And so I guess my question to you is, how does the design team think about this paradox, right? Between this incredibly challenging, deep, almost unplayable thing and this desire to bring people in and make it accessible.
Right. Yeah. I think this is something I feel very strongly about, because I feel that paradox exists, but I think we even analyze it kind of as an industry in a way that I think is intuitive, but I don't think is correct. Okay. Right. Let's think about games that are really culturally relevant to us as gamers, that we talk about them 10 years later. We talk about them as big pieces of what we're thinking about, Counter-Strike, StarCraft, Halo series, games like this. These games all have depth, and depending on what you want, you'll like them or not like the game, depending on your preferences. But actually, that's what makes popular games. All those games have mastery, right? They have deep mastery curves. So our assumption from the get-go was players desire mastery. It's one of our core pillars of League of Legends and Riot generally. So with that, we think the paradox is actually well, if you try to make your game broadly appealing first and then make it deep, you'll fail, because you're building on a weak foundation. There's nothing to hold up the house at that point, right? Because accessibility is great, but it can't be the foundation of your game if you want to make a masterful game. If you build depth first and kind of make a game that's rich in decision making, highly challenging, lets you master things over tens and hundreds of hours, thousands of hours if you really want to, then go, okay, we've made this, great. Now how do we make it so it's more understandable? Because now we've made the thing. Now all we have to do is teach. That's a much easier, I think, pattern to follow to make a rich game. And I think those games, in the long term, are much more popular than games that are very popular and in a short period and kind of die off really quickly. And I think the craving for that's not only represented in the games we talked about. There's people here still playing Counter-Strike Go. I'm still playing Counter-Strike Go. That game is freaking 16 years old, right? Why are we still playing this thing, right? It's because this mastery loop is that rich. And there's you only play 3 maps. And you still play it. And that's how much I think kind of our brains are just hardwired to want to learn, want to overcome. And if you deliver that to players in ways that's fun and satisfying on top of it, I think it's a mistake to underestimate that people are smart. People are smart and want to learn. And if you assume they don't, I just think that's really just underestimating what players are capable of.
It's so amazing. To me, it reminds me of, I always like to think about America in the 50s and its love affair with bridge. I don't know if you've ever tried to play bridge. Oh. Anyone plays bridge here? Bridge is the hardest game in the world. It's super hard. It's like League of Legends in this. It's incredibly challenging. It's hard. There's mechanics in it in terms of memorization and attention, and then there's all these layers of subtle metagame that you have to learn, just like League. And yet, for a while, it was as popular as the Wii. Do you know what I mean? It was just a phenomenon, and it was played by everybody. And it just demonstrates that with the right game, you can have something that is both mega popular and truly, truly deep, right? I mean, it's such a, but do you ever feel like these things are at odds? I mean, do you ever, on the design team, do you ever reach a point where you're like, okay, this is something that would make the game better, like more deep, it's more strategic, add the kind of stuff that we want, but it's the cost, the administrative overhead for the player is too high.
Definitely. There's complexity. Complexity is one you have to be careful with, because complexity and depth have a relationship, but they're not the same thing. And I think complexity is a cost, and you try to pay the littlest cost you can in complexity to get the most depth. So if you do a depth-first approach, you go, okay, I want this depth. Okay, how do I pair the gameplay systems around it down to be the most understandable versions without sacrificing depth, right? So I think, honestly, a place where we've gone a little too far is the new jungle, right? The new jungle, I think, actually does add some decision-making. Again, more work to do, sorry. But does add some more decision making. It does add some more ability to interact with the monster side of the jungle. That's good. I would say we didn't do a good enough job in not only teaching, but making it satisfying in other game design things. Like, it doesn't feel particularly great right now to earn your Smite reward. That probably doesn't make you start feeling like you're mastering it and wanting to do it better, or the rewards are a little diffuse. These things all matter when you create depth. So depth isn't like the tyrant of the fiefdom who just like cuts down all other game design elements, but he is kind of first in line, right? And I think that's when you use that and then go, okay, we have depth, great. Now let's apply good satisfaction principles. Let's make sure that there's good feedback loops. Let's apply good ways to unfold the information so that players can learn it in a natural way without making it less deep. You just think about unfolding kinds of things as the player experiences them more and going, okay, I learned this bit of information. Okay, now I'm ready for the next bit. Give it to me. Let's go. Let's go.
I want to drill down and ask about a specific mechanic, which is denial. So at the very beginning, at the roots of League of Legends, one of the things that distinguished it from Defense of the Ancients and other MOBAs was you guys took denial out, right? And at the time, I remember thinking, that's weird, because you're obviously, I mean, that's a whole like part of the skill ceiling that you've dropped down, right? This is clearly an important part of what makes these kinds of games, truly deep and complex and challenging. But now looking back on it, it seems like maybe that was like a brilliant move. I mean, so I guess I kind of want to, what do you guys think about that particular moment? And how important was that in the success of League, in your mind?
So how many of you guys played during beta? So actually quite a few, that's good. So you guys remember the forum conversations. This was like Watergate for us. Like, this was the hugest topic, because it's very divisive, as you say, and it's almost like you're saying, hey, we're making a hardcore game for hardcore players, and you're like, we're moving to deny. You're like, what? Why? Like, so I think some explanation is important on that. And it's kind of like the analogy I would use is you want to add skill to the game. You want to make sure skills are being tested. So like, think about last hitting. You're trying to manage these minions. It's taking your focus. And while you're doing that, you have an enemy trying to disrupt you. And that's kind of a lot of the lane game. Deny is actually the same skill set. You're testing managing the minions, being pressured by an opponent, watching their health, and doing things like that. It actually double dips into the same skill set. So what you actually do, just like we said earlier, while does it create a higher skill ceiling? Yes, but it tests the same skill twice. So is denial superfluous? And in our thinking, we thought yes. It's basically an added complexity that adds low depth. So the cost to ratio of game design of what players actually can do new, because denying exists. There's a couple of unique interactions that exist in old school Dota and stuff that are rich. I would say cost to benefit ratio for how much it adds on kind of weight to the game's back versus how much more it allows for mastery of players is low. And that's where we start making cuts and go, okay, let's make sure that the last hitting itself is a big part of the game. Let's make sure lane has some sanctity to it, right? Like, hey, lane's your chance to duel, right? Like, let's make sure those matchups are interesting. Let's make sure that gameplay, the counterplay between characters, and you guys are tired of that word already, but I'm going to keep saying it. But the ability to say, you did something. Okay, how does that change my decisions? I'm going to hit my mic a lot. And those decisions we thought could lead more of the gameplay in lane to be about managing the minions, managing your gold income stream and your uptime in lane, and then managing what do we do against each other as the two primary skills, which tends to have a lot of depth in it already. So we did think Denial's kind of superfluous to test the minion management skill.
Yeah. Which, by the way, I think is such the secret ingredient. Like, I think CS is like this essential thing that people don't recognize how important it is. Right? This like this thing that is, it could be a standalone game on its own, right? I mean, it's so deep and challenging just getting good and really mastering that. Yeah, but I think now that when I think about the removal of denial, it's almost like, the way I think about it is it's a path that makes the game less deep in order to make it deeper. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So let's imagine. Here's a stupid example. This is exaggerated, so I know this is a dumb example and a straw man. Forgive me. Let's imagine we're playing chess, and we're awesome at chess. And let's say I want to go. You know what would make chess harder?
Basketball. And Pokemon.
Basketball. Yeah. Let's take the exact game of chess, and every time you take a piece, I have to juggle knives for a second and a half. If every time I take a piece, I have to do that, that would make the game harder. It would be more skilled to play that game of chess, bar none. You can't even deny that. It would make you not focus on where the gameplay lies. I would start focusing on juggling knives as a skill. Should we reward that skill? Should that skill be what the game's about? I think the answer is no, and then you want to remove certain superfluous mechanics and systems like that to allow the depth in the gameplay to focus on where the decision-making is rich, right? And I think Denial's a good example of that, honestly.
Yeah, another way that I think about it is that depth is not simply a property of the system as some kind of mathematical abstract property. It is a property of the system in its relationship to an actual community of human beings that play it. And that humans create depth. Right, that you get depth by having humans in your game, by having players in your game. And so accessibility is actually not, orthogonal to depth. In a strange way, they're congruent, right?
They're often opposed in the methodology of how. But but they help each other when they're both good.
So that's depth. Now let's look at the other kind of side of the coin, which is fun.
Okay.
I know you guys use the word fun. I've heard Zilius use the term anti-fun. I know that you guys like to avoid things that are anti-fun, whatever that means. And I think you guys have a sophisticated understanding of that. You're not using it as a placeholder.
Sure.
You're saying it's a broad term that describes all the positive psychological effects, pleasure and satisfaction, excitement, and all the challenge and everything else. But are there ever times when on the other end, if there's a compromise that you feel you have to make between something that's fun and something that the game needs, right? Is there anything where it's like, oh yeah, there's a conflict, we'd like to put this in because it's clearly fun, it's delightful or it's giving pleasure to the players, but it's not what the game needs to have?
Honestly, this is like the hardest thing in the world on League of Legends. That is actually where we often have our backs up against the wall. So, I mean, even think about something as simple as champion balance, right? So, Lee Sin is really fun. Like, people like seeing him, people like playing him, people like watching it. He's a super fun champion, and he's pretty deep. It's good. However, he's also, some of it, or there's probably better examples, but let's assume. Some of it's fun because you shit on people. And so we got to go, that's fun and satisfying. And this is why it's a national order every time you touch Lee Sin, because all the people who are having fun with him go, but I'm having fun with him. And you're like, you can't deny that. They are. They're having a good time. But you go, wow, what's this mean for the fun of the rest of the game? What's this mean for the overall enjoyment of the game? What's this mean for the rich decision-making of champion choice, how I deal with situations, what my new options are when I see this character in game? And when those become low, then we have that dichotomy a lot of times. A lot of the champion designs that I think are most game health problematic, like I would say, like, for example, like Zed's really hard to get under control. But he's a really well-done champion from a gameplay standpoint. He's fun to play, adds a lot of that. but man, he really limits the variety by him being there. Like, we tried to make a fun champion, right? We tried to add some depth. We didn't quite get there. Vi's ult is another good example. There's a lot of skills that are like, you look at them and they probably limit choice in certain ways. And we think that's where we failed to marry those ideas as well as we need to. What's the output of that action? Like, oh, Vi's ult's fun, but it actually means that it basically says auto dive back lane with somebody that can always kill you. Like, ooh, yeah, that's limiting other choices, even though it's very fun to do. So that is probably when making champions, when making balance changes, when making systems, when making item changes. Fun tends to be the hardest thing pushing up against depth and vice versa in an interesting way, which is where we often will get into judgment calls that we can go either way on and fall on the wrong side sometimes. So I do think that is the largest challenge with a game like this.
Yeah. So you mentioned spectators, right?
Yeah.
Lee Sin being fun to watch. How do you guys, as the design team at Riot, deal with the issues around making the game legible, thinking about how it works as television?
So we have a whole quick disclosure on how that actually works, because I think it's even surprising to me still. We have a whole area of the company that's esports broadcasting that are like hyper focused on the broadcast. But we have to work with them sometimes just to go, hey, you know, the thing we're making probably should be showable. That'd be good. The same things, though. Here's the thing that's interesting. It's almost what makes a good broadcast, I believe, and I have strong convictions about this, let's say, are the same things that make good games, good competitive games. And that's visual hierarchy of, like, which information on the screen is most important. I hope that's the information you're seeing the most. Yeah. You know, certain things on the art technique side that I wish we had artists here who could really speak intelligently about this. I have a basic understanding at best, which is, wow, the character pops out from the background. Oh, that when the guy kills, the announcement is big. That all these things show all players what's happening in the game. Since the players can already see what's happening, you just put a camera on it. And people can see what's happening and understand it. And I think there's a lot of the esports broadcasting thing that make the game legible from an understanding standpoint, like the shoutcasting efforts, a lot of the knowledge base that those guys work to build up, because the game is, if you're a novice or you're just not really engaged with it, but you want to watch, it's hard to understand without some explanation. So we try to provide some of that. But without the high saturation particle effects, without the kind of visual hierarchy, without the kind of the responsiveness things like no turning radius, fast, you know, standardized attack times, all those things coming together to go, when I watch the game, I understand what's happening and it meets my expectations, same as when you play it. Yeah. And I think those things are actually really congruent.
Yeah. Can I give you an idea? Free idea.
Sure.
Okay. A 6th player on each team that's controlled by Twitch chat. You like that?
That sounds like an awesome featured game mode.
Right? Okay. You heard it here.
I like it. I like it.
All right.
I always said it sounds awesome.
So I want to talk about, the game is incredibly challenging and hard to watch, right? I watch it more than I play it. And one of the things I like about watching it is how much, you know, kind of you need to develop literacy just in order to understand what's going on. And one of the things that I'm only now starting to appreciate is picks and bans. So I'm a little obsessed with picks and bans because I don't think it really gets discussed that much. I don't think there's I don't, you know, see a lot of like good kind of general strategic discussion of this phase of the game, which when I sat and started to think about is kind of crazy, right? Because you have this incredibly rich, complicated choice game in which you have to, at each moment, be considering general champion strength, which champions your team is best at, which champions the opponents are best at, hard counters between champions, how the champs synergize together, what general strategies emerge out of different combinations of champions, like whether it's hard engage or split push or, you know, poke or siege, and then how those general strategies interact with each other in a kind of rock, paper, scissors. And you're making these decisions it's this incredibly complicated decision tree, and at the end of each branch, right, is an entire game of League of Legends that you have to think about, right, and think through. I don't even know if there's a question here. I'm just fascinated by it, and I kind of want to know, like, how does the design team think about that part of the game?
We actually use it. So it's an important part of the game, right? Though it is important to say that it's most important to the most competitive people, and least important to most players, right? Most of our games are in normal games, so non-draft mode. So many players don't experience pick and ban, which means we can't actually rely upon it for all general play solutions. Like you can't just go, oh, Katarina is really OP right now. A lot of players don't have an opportunity to deal with that. So we do see it though. What's nice is, like you said though, is the pick and ban system starts working really well when you understand your opponent. When you know it's Cloud9 v CLG and they know each other's champion strengths, and now they can start targeting, right? Those kinds of things force them to deepen their champion pools, force them to have alternate strategies. It does have some downsides. It actually, picks and bans actually will tend to trend towards generalization.
Huh, what do you mean?
Basically let's say you're really good at Nunu, somebody who's really good at a couple of things and pretty much awful at everything else, right? If you're really good with Nunu, now I want to ban Nunu. Now I ban Nunu, you're going to pick a less sharp and kind of like game-changing champion, maybe back for a more generalized champion. That's a game design problem that kind of exposes itself in pick and ban. So there's some downsides, but I do think when you see the most competitive players talking about picks and bans, banning people out, like what that means for their strategies, I do think there's richness there. We just can't rely on it for all of our variety and kind of strategy needs.
Do you guys ever think about forking the game between casual play and kind of high-level competitive play?
A little, and I think, use another analog, like CS has competitive mode, and competitive mode is 100% tournament rules, and that's how you get ranked and everything like that. And then they have a bunch of other modes that are the same game, but not, the eSports mode, right? And players self-select in and out, and I think that's a nice system because you can say, look, I'm super competitive. That's the kind of player I identify as. I'm going to go have this experience, and it's analogous to what I see when I see LCS, and I'm just trying to be that good, right? Or you can say, look, I like League of Legends guys, but that's not who I am or who I'm going to be or what I want to do. I'm going to instead do this. ARAM's a little of that, but it's a totally different game. So yeah, I think I wouldn't say go make 2 separate games or anything like that. I think that gets into deep water.
I know that you're not on the business side of things. But I'm curious about how the business side of things impacts design. If there's ever conflict, tension. I mean, in some ways, League of Legends is a great example of free-to-play done right. Free-to-play, this kind of dark specter hovering over the game industry. From a designer's point of view, we're like, conflicted about it. But it seems to be working really well. But I wonder, are there ever tensions, conflicts, things you guys have to wrestle with?
So on the game design side, I've been at Riot almost 5 years, never a single time.
Great.
That's pretty incredible. And what's important about that is basically, like, we think it's important to keep that oil and water separated to certain degrees. Not that business and game design don't have any shared goals at all, but we basically say, look, our business model is pretty simple, generally speaking, as my plebeian brain understands it, is let's make cool stuff that people want to buy, and then they'll buy it. And I don't know, like, if there's anything more to it than that. And so, like, then the game designers go, let's make cool stuff that people want, and then they'll get it. And it's like, oh, okay, now we're not in conflict. As opposed to, hey, could you go? We don't have any practices like, look, let's go in and try to maximize the revenue on this champion. Like, go make a good champion, like a great champion for gameplay and game experience, and the rest will take care of itself.
Nice. How much do you incorporate high-level? So you come out of like competitive Tekken, right?
Yeah, way back in Tekken Tag Tournament, Tekken 3, Tekken 2. So one Tekken player.
And then you transitioned into design. Like, so what is your relationship now on the design team with high-level players? Do you ever bring them in to consult or to have a conversation with?
We pay attention to high-level play. My personal relationship with high-level players is weak, frankly. Mostly, a lot of the guys doing the day-to-day work, though, have deep understanding of what's going on in the competitive scene, and occasionally we have little summits where we chat with the competitive guys. So we don't think it's appropriate to like have them on as like full design consultant or anything like that, because I think there's some goals that are non-analogous. Like our goal is to make a game that's really interesting, really rich, really deep, where it's a lot of fun, things like that. esports teams have one different primary goal, and they should have this goal, by the way. This is not derogatory. This is the only way to do it. Their goal is to fucking win, right? Like, win games, make money, right? Like, do that. And that's what being a competitive team in any sport or game is about. So we have to understand that we do have some different goals sometimes, but there's a lot of knowledge we can learn from each other about how to better say, hey, look, we're winning in this way a lot, and it's really actually super boring. Like, oh, okay, that's really interesting. Or we're winning in this way, and we don't feel there's any other options available. Like, okay, let's analyze that. And we kind of use it as the start of the question as opposed to the answer to the question. And we think that's the healthy relationship.
But it's not like Bjergsen has a hotline where he just picks it up and says, you know.
Morello, have you nerfed this yet?
Okay,
good. No, like, that doesn't happen. Back in the day, it was a little like that back in Beta 0.
Really?
So Classic, for you old school guys, you might remember Classic when it was like Classic and Reginald and Frost just kind of like derping around in normals, killing all of us. And like a lot of the time, they would just message us on the League client when we were really small. Just message me or Zilius and just like, hey, dude, do you know this is freaking broken? We're like, oh, cool. And we'd look into it. But yeah, since yonder days, we haven't been able to maintain that kind of relationship with them.
I want to ask a little bit about the difference between how it works at Riot now. We have a very kind of deliberate design process, thoughtful, self-reflective, professional, and the roots of MOBA-style games, right, which were this kind of like messy, organic, it's almost like a folk design process, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so the roots of this game are in map makers and modders, like just trying different things, and then there's this like 10-year evolutionary process of like incremental changes. It wasn't centralized. It wasn't controlled and mindful. It was the work of many hands. It was this organic folk process, and so how do you think about that transition? Is that just a natural transition that happens as a game evolves and matures now that it is this professional thing? Or is it not that much of a transition at all? Is there still room within the Riot process for this kind of trial and error, this kind of randomness, and this kind of like many hands evolutionary process?
To give you the most unsatisfying answer, it's a mix. So part of this is we use an engineered design approach, as I was saying, systemic thinking. But that we can't discount creativity. We can't, and creativity is not ideas, but creativity is about rich problem solving in creative ways, and thinking of new ways to tackle problems, right? Which I think is actually the root of what you see in good things. Like, think about original mod Dota. It wasn't spaghetti against the wall, right? There was a lot of hands, but when we see there's iterations that are better, there's iterations that are not as good, because what goals were they trying to achieve? They had some idea of what the end looked like. Right? And when they did, I think we see good results. When they don't, I think you see very scattered results. I think it's the same in professional design, right? So we still have a lot of autonomy on each individual contributor. Like, it's very important to us that, guys who are doing work actually are not just like doing like my bidding or something silly like that, which would be awful, by the way. But instead are contributing fresh things to the game, challenging what we know, like trying to do new stuff, but doing so in a reasoned and logical way. So that creativity, we think we don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. To have a structured approach to go, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? All right, let's talk about designs that can do that. And going, look, here's the thing I really want to do. I don't know what the goal set should look like. What's the best way for us to utilize it, or why should we? So it can come from either side, but it just has to be rooted in reason.
Yeah, and maybe it's not that different. I think maybe our whole notion of what folk design is, when we think about where did chess come from, where did poker come from, is really just a matter of distance. That if we were closer to it, we would see, no, it's always groups of people making these kinds of decisions, and whether they're in a company or in a community of players, it's a similar process.
And those mod communities are small usually enough that modders know each other. They share knowledge, whether intentionally or not. Best practices are revealed, and they're basically kind of like a really disorganized indie studio in certain ways, right? And indie studios can use systemic thinking, so I don't believe modders can't.
So I want to really quick ask you a little bit about Valve. How much do you guys think about Dota 2 as a competitor? What do you like about the way Valve is doing stuff? What do you dislike about it? Like, give me a little taste of the rivalry.
This is always the trap card. But to be frank,
that was my job.
I see what you did there. So I think I love Valve's games. Like, I played I've played quadruple-digit hours of TF2. Like it was a problem. Like I was starting to miss work. Like it was an issue, right? I still play a lot of Counter-Strike Go. I honestly love Valve shooters. I'm just going to be real about it. And a lot of us like different games. Dota 2 is a game. Some of us play it. Some of us like it. We pay attention to it like we do any other game, though. I don't think whether you're a MOBA or not grants you, like, we should probably be a little bit more educated about techniques being used in a MOBA, but we're not like, oh, Dota, you're the worst and you suck and we hate you. Or we're not like, oh my God, Dota's our overlords. We're like, we don't have a super strong opinion in that way. We're going, oh, what's working there? What's not working there? Oh, that's interesting to us. But we also do this with first-person shooters, with RPGs. Like, there's so much to learn abstractly from any game. Like, go play, Invisible Ink, single player, like procedural stealth stuff. I'm like, there's stuff for League of Legends to learn in that, right? Like, because game design's not about, the genre is almost kind of like not important. It's somewhat important, but it's not where the real game design innovations are happening. Like, think about this really quickly. So let's say you're playing Counter-Strike and you go, look at the weapon dropping system. You can just throw a weapon. You buy a weapon and throw it. How that you can give players money, essentially that way. That's analogous to maybe something you'd want to do if you wanted to allow money transfer in League of Legends. Maybe throw items to them instead. Like, that could be cool.
But you heard it here first, folks. No, I'm kidding.
Maybe.
I'm sorry.
No, it's not in the works.
No spoilers.
But that's an example of analogous thinking across genres, right?
Yeah.
Like, we both have economies. We both have wealth and items we can build.
Yeah.
These approaches could work for everybody. So, to answer your question directly, do we have a special relationship with Dota, like as far as like how we think about it and stuff? Not really, or any game, but we have to play a lot of games. If you're a game designer and you don't play a lot of games, you're boned. Yeah. Like, you're just screwed, right? Like, you don't know what's happening. You're not learning new innovations. You're not seeing things that were tried and maybe didn't succeed and going, why did that fail? Could that succeed, and is that applicable? Yeah. Like, that's really our relationship to other games, other than just being up at 2 in the morning and playing because they're fun.
Couple more questions from me, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. So be thinking about questions you have for Ryan. I want to ask a little bit about community, the problem of toxicity. This seems to be such a genuinely hard problem, right? Not just it's not just the fact that people are jerks. It's like, the way I think about it is that there's a legitimately non-trivial problem that people are trying to solve, which is how to play this game well, how to coordinate actions between groups of strangers who are learning and who are uncertain about each other's skill levels and so on and so forth. But you guys have thought a lot about how to improve the culture, and I want to hear how that impacts the design team.
So this is actually an area I don't think I can speak about very well, because I don't feel like I understand this problem very well.
That's interesting.
You guys probably know Light, right? He understands this super well. That's like his job. So I think he's giving a talk at on Thursday. Honestly, I'm gonna have to just kick the ball on that one because I don't feel like I have anything really meaningful.
Plug his talk Thursday. Do you know what time of the day?
I don't remember.
All right, so that's where to go to find out more about that.
I'll be there, but I don't remember.
Yeah, and then I guess finally I want to ask a little bit about sort of League of Legends, which is like how does the design team have input or influence over the larger questions of the tournament design, the overall season, these kind of bigger, larger scale structural questions about the big picture?
Very little, oddly. And like I said, we have that kind of the best way to describe it is we have kind of a separation of church and state on this a little bit, to where we need to interact and we need to work together on certain things, but we think optimizing, like if game designers do the tournament structure, it would be optimized for good gameplay and optimized for like variety and depth, which might be okay. But I really think it's honestly probably smarter to operate the season and the tournament structure around viewership, right? We don't run these tournaments, we run these tournaments to give people something to watch that's enjoyable to them and let them engage with the game they hopefully really like by paying attention to how pros are playing it, right? So the guys who are making the decisions about seasons and that kind of stuff are experts in this field. Game design is starting to interact a little bit more there, just on a kind of like, let's talk about these problems that we don't know. It kind of lives in the middle line. Like, for example, does the tournament format, as we have it right now, does it limit variety of team strategies? That's an interesting conversation where design and esports need to come together and go, okay, what are the factors here? And then we'll come away usually with some kind of plan or agreement afterwards. But it's very collaborative when we do work together. But we don't input direct work and productivity into that.
Nice. Nice. All right, I'm going to open it up to see if there's any questions from the audience. Please come to the microphones, and why don't we'll just cycle through. Why don't we start over here?
Okay. Thanks for the talk. Good to see you staying hydrated, always.
Yes, always. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, of course. So I was reminded when he asked a question about like forking, the player base into like ultra competitive and casual or whatever. I don't know if I was talking to Light, Cadwell, Jeffrey, or you, where I was thinking people could like self-flag as like, how seriously do I want to play or take this game, and do I want my teammates to be? And I think the objection, it was probably Jeffrey, brought up was like, well, people could just troll. They could say I'm super casual, but then they just go and stomp everybody.
Yep.
And so I just realized that if how you mark yourself changes the, what do you call it, like the behavioral algorithms, like what you get flagged for or reported for will matter differently based on how you flagged yourself.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand your question. Is the worry of self-selecting in and out is trolling and just selecting the wrong thing. Therefore, could you make it an automated process?
Not make it an automated process, but make it so that the reporting options will hit people differently based on how they flagged. Like,
I mean, I think so. Like, you could do that. Again, like that kind of thing is, I do think is more in Light's category about like how are you going to manage players' behavior. For me, it's if you create different modes, you want to create different expectations and reward structures for those modes, and players should want to self-select into the correct mode. That's where I would take it from the game design standpoint. For example, in Counter-Strike, you can do this. I could just go, my Gold Nova 4 friends can just go into casual and just stomp people, but it's a waste of their time most of the time because they don't get rewarded for that. They don't get skin unlocks, they don't get ranking modifiers, and honestly, they tend to get bored pretty fast. They also have a sharper division between it. So, like ARAMs, like platinum dudes probably come play in your ARAM games, and it kind of doesn't matter too much, So I think if you make it not matter, then you don't have to tightly manage the behavior as much.
Nice.
Yeah, simplicity is nice, so thanks.
Let's go to middle.
Hi, Ryan.
Hello.
You already talked about Dota 2, looking at that and how you look at other games, other genres of games. But I'm wondering, from a design standpoint, how closely are you following MOBAs on non-PC platforms? So mobile and also what Smite is doing on Xbox. I mean, how important is that to how you're thinking about new iterations for the game?
I think it's still the same rule applies. We are, to be frank, we are primarily PC focused as like who we think our players are, who we think are likes these sort of games, stuff like that. That doesn't mean we're oblivious to console stuff or other MOBA efforts on like mobile and stuff. But I would say we probably give them second billing as far as like how much of our time we allocate to paying attention to that, just because we think it's a little less applicable. Though, if genre doesn't matter, then definitely console and delivery or system doesn't matter that much either. So there's lessons to be learned there too. I would just say we're probably less interested in those games as players, so it makes it a little bit more of an effort for us.
Do you guys ever think or talk about what a mobile experience might be like? No.
We talk about it.
Idle thoughts.
Yeah,
no spoilers.
Yeah, we just kind of we talk about all sorts of stupid crap though.
All right.
So
I'm trying to sneak a spoiler out of you. Okay. Yes.
Hi. Thanks for the talk, by the way.
Thank you.
So for Ryan, so what are your thoughts on Flash being a summoner spell that's almost required to play? And are there any thoughts like making other summoner spells that would make it so that players have to choose between taking Flash or not? Because right now it's like 99% of the time you take Flash.
This has been a long conversation. For anybody who likes Flash, if you follow Shorelia on Twitter, thank her. She saved Flash when I wanted to remove it 3 years ago.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I think it was the right decision. This is one of those dichotomies of what makes good gameplay versus where do you want choice. So it's easy to say, if we remove Flash or replace Flash with something or made other summoner spells comparable to Flash, we could create more variety in summoner spells. Yes, could do that. However, does Flash make the game? I think my belief is that Flash makes the game better by its existence. Therefore, I would want to be looking at alternate approaches if we wanted to increase the variety of summoner spells of letting, like, you get Flash +1, or you get Flash +2, or something like that, are solutions I like more because I'd hate to lose the value of ubiquitous Flash.
You know, it's really interesting sometimes that there is a conflict between what seems like good game design principles and what is actually beautiful in a game. Like, I think of the AWP in CSGO, which is this overpowered weapon. It's like, as a game designer, I want to say, oh, that's not elegant because it's not balanced, but it's so much part of the beauty of the game. I just think recognizing those things and being able to accept them is actually a great lesson. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi. Thank you for the talk, and not just because everybody else said thank you. That's a joke.
Thanks, man.
My question was, when did the talk start happening for going from releasing 2 skins with new champions to 1 skin?
Sorry, can you repeat the middle part of that? I didn't quite catch you.
My question was, when did the talk start happening for limiting how many skins get released with champions?
Oh, man, that was a long time ago. So probably a few months before we did it. That's about how long things take. I would say, do you want to know why or do you want to know when?
More so the why.
Yeah. Why was generally, the skins team itself generally believed they could not produce high quality skins consistently at the rate we had to, especially when we were releasing champions so fast, that we would watch kind of like how much players attached to certain skins and other ones. On the launch skins, there'd always be one that did pretty well and one that did really poorly. The one that did really poorly was always the one they had to work on second, almost. So basically, they couldn't focus their time and effort into making a great skin experience. And so we decided to sack a variety of skins for quality of skins. And that was because making one better skin takes longer than making 2 worse skins. So it's literally a resource allocation and focus problem.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's go back here.
Yeah, a couple questions about your testing procedure.
Just one.
I imagine that the high-level players are kind of playing at a different level than anyone on the dev team. So
correct.
When you're doing your 2 play tests a day kind of thing to test, you can't cover that type of play style.
Yep.
Are you dealing strictly reactively with any type of problems you introduce at that level, or do you have strategies for dealing with proactively? And follow-up question to that would be, do you have any automated testing around locking in game balance issues in the game, or is it all just done by feel?
So we do have now, we actually have a couple challengers on the design team, like challenger ranked guys and several diamond ones. So we actually can get much closer to what that world looks like than I think we'd be able to if we didn't. But I think we've largely been reactionary in the past. In this year, have created a rubric to try to be more proactive in pushing the game. Like, that was part of the pattern I was talking about earlier, generally for the company. So we hope to do better there because we think we can do better. And do we have automated testing? I don't have a good answer for that. Just really don't have good expertise in our testing rigor.
Thanks.
Yes.
One of many major differences between the LCS and the NFL is that a lot of NFL audience members don't play tackle football very regularly, whereas the majority of LCS audience members play League. Is there a goal of trying to change that and broaden the LCS audience to non-players? And if so, how do you do that?
I have no idea. I'm sorry. I would say it does. I will give you something else on the question, though, is I think that because players play it as well as watch it, unlike football, right, is that actually esports affects their play, right? The trickle-down effect of popularity in esports is a huge determinant in popularity of champions, regardless of the actual effect. It's really, really crazy. So I think that effect is the one we pay the most attention to, is how the spectator sport impacts the play.
But the short answer is you're sort of given up on the idea of...
I literally have no idea. Like, that is like, you just asked me a similar question to how are you going to architect better servers in Germany? Like, that is the level of knowledge I don't have about this.
Okay. How are you going to do that? No, I'm just kidding. So we have time for one more question with Tubes. Yes.
Tubes.
How has the rise of esports within Riot and outside within the community forced the design team to adapt, to that kind of growth?
Very much so, and I think more so, I would say, also exposes where we have room to grow. When we see challenges that we are unable to solve at this, the popularity of esports says, you don't get to just sit there and put that one off for another day. You got to get on it. So it's actually challenged us in a lot of good ways to improve as an organization and as a design team. That's exciting. frustrating sometimes because of the way the problems occur. I would say the popularity of esports has made us need to focus much more on that link between competitive play and normal play and how they affect each other, way more so than we ever had to in like season 1 or anything like that.
All right, I think that's all we have time for. I want to thank Ryan Scott so much.
Thanks, guys.
That was awesome. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Stay right here for more esports goodness. If you love esports and want to hear more about it, if you like StarCraft and Hearthstone and Counter-Strike and shooters and fighting games and women in esports, then you got to stay right here, and we'll see you all day long.